So your book, The Chimp Paradox, is absolutely like world famous. I wonder if I can ask you what's the mind model that you introduce in the book, and then we'll kind of
going
segue
back,
from there.
to the 1990s. What happened is there was an epiphany moment, and it was with a particular patient. So I won't go into the great detail, but just to say that I was able, by just asking the right questions, to talk to what I thought was a very sensible person, and then suddenly someone who didn't seem sensible at all and was very emotional and pretty catastrophic in thinking. So I started looking at because we'd now got functional MRI scanners, what does the research show us on this? And I started realizing that if we scan somebody's brain and they were talking as what I'd call a human being, they were rational, they were logical. So I'm going to simplify the neuroscience because I realize a lot of listeners are not neuroscientists. We looked at the top part of your head, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, seem to be leading on this. And this we know is where executive functioning takes place. So in essence, if you put your oxygen supply in that part of your brain, you're going to think and work in a certain way.
Yep.
You'll look for facts, logic, but there's more to it that hit me. That part of the brain works with acceptance and starts saying it is what it is. That part of the brain looks for solutions. As opposed to when I started moving the patient by asking emotive questions, so things that would make them upset or more emotional. If you look at functional scanners, what will happen, they'll go to the orbitofrontal cortex, just above your eyes. And now they start acting in a very strange way. They wouldn't work with facts at all. In fact, they'd have great difficulty accepting them. Mm. So what they do is go on feelings. I'm not saying they're wrong. And intuition. And they'll work with those. And they won't understand facts. It's almost like facts are not part of the vocabulary. So what I started to see is I've got two people in the room or two brains in the room. So then I start looking and think, well, how can I understand this better? And it became two systems. So then I looked and I thought, you see classic connections in the brain. So when the orbitofrontal works, it pulls on things like the amygdala heavily. All of the brain to me is like an orchestra. So both of these systems pull on the brain, but they select certain of the instruments. Mm. And the orbitofrontal selects feelings, past experience, emotion. It works on trigger points. It works on behaviors. Yep. So this is behavioral therapies coming in. Mm. And then I looked at the dorsolateral areas, and they don't work with behaviors. They work with rationality and thinking. So your cognitive therapies are coming in.
Mm. Nice.
And that, I thought, this is really good. But there's more to the brain than that. So in the center, you've got all this other sort of instruments playing away. They're not the lead instruments. They're not the orchestral conductors, which is what these two other parts are. They're the thinkers. Yeah. But they actually contribute heavily. So I started seeing that as being a computer. So what I'd got is the center of the brain was a computer advising, but it does more than advise, and we may get to this. It actually takes over. So there was a paradox that when you imprint a belief in that computer, the two thinkers are going to be the decision makers.
Yep.
Have to listen to that. They can't go against it.
Okay.
So, for example, if you had a belief that this building was unsound and the roof is about to collapse, then whether you think emotionally or rationally, you have to get out of the building.
Yep.
You know? So the center of your brain, it was crucial that it seemed blank at birth, apart from instincts and drives, it's blank. Belief systems start coming in and we work them out from being taught or experience. So I started thinking we can alter that, and that would alter whether you left the building or not on your belief.
Yeah.
So this all got complicated as it's doing. And I thought, this got to be made simple. Now, I teach at Sheffield Medical School, and teaching medical students, they like things simple and practical, as I do. And I'm thinking these are doctors to be, and they're not going to be neuroscientists. They're going to be, many of them, GPs and other careers in medicine. But they want an understanding of what the patients are thinking and how they act and how they can work with that. And so I then had another epiphany. Mm. I started looking at people and thinking when they're irrational, they looked just like chimpanzees. I looked at chimpanzees and thought they have a society which is very similar. Not everything is in line. But I started speaking to the hominid specialists, people who knew the apes, but more important, the ones who were the neuroscientists looking at the apes. And at that point, I was told, and I believed them, the chimpanzee and the human have the same system in their brain when we're reacting emotionally. So, but the other apes don't. So we think in a certain way. Now, this has been published 20 years on. In 2018, they published this to say the other great apes, the gorilla, orangutan, bonobo, they don't think like humans and chimpanzees. But we are so close that we say this is our nearest relative because we think the way they think. Genetically, it's not our nearest relative. The bonobo's got more genes. So I just coined the phrase. I said to the students, if I said you had a little chimp in your head, and when you're in this part of your brain, that's the chimp brain. They loved it. It was simple. So when you become irrational or your mind takes over, that part of your brain works with trigger points, behaviors, is impulsive, catastrophic. It's a defense system.
Yep.
Whereas when you move to the dorsolateral areas, you're in human mode. Now it's you. But what was intriguing is I was getting this with patients, and then there was this moment for me, an epiphany, probably around just the late 90s. There was no control over the orbitofrontal. It was very fast moving, and it's a reactive system, and it's inbuilt and you're given it. And when you look at the development of the brain, it has a head start in the fetus. So it's already operating in fetal life, and it keeps going right through the whole of our life. Whereas the human part, as I'm calling it, didn't operate. So we come late to the party. So I started then looking at child development, and I found that it's obvious, it became blatant, that children around 2 or 3 start saying why. And the dorsolateral areas are coming in with reasoning. Before that, they don't ask. It's behavioral. So, for example, if you want to help a child that's distressed, distract it. You know, and we know that works best. Don't reason with it because you can't reason. So this all started coming together, and I thought, I've got to keep it simple. So the students helped me. They wouldn't let me go complex. So they said, right, you've got a human brain, which is, you are in control of that. And that's logic, rational, calm, and solution finding. You've got a chimp brain, which you've been given at birth. And that's why at the beginning of this, I said, that's your mind. It's a machine. You don't have a say in it. Research shows that for most of us, we're on the neurotic type spectrum. Our chimp system is highly strong and it's quite reactive and impulsive. But there's a spectrum. Some people have very quiescent, calm chimps. And I always say to people, if you've got a calm chimp, it may seem an advantage, but actually in the long run, it's a negative. Because it's meant to be highly reactive. It's meant to give you warning of danger. And that, going back to your point about sports people or anybody, it can be your best friend because that thinks outside the box and reacts quick and warns you of danger. And we know our intuitive skills, research shows, are far more accurate than when we have to try and find logic and facts initially. So working with intuition, as long as it's functioning well, is actually a massive plus. So you have to start joining forces of 2 thinking brains and start working together. And again, the research shows the people who work with both the logic and the intuition and learn how to manage them and the emotional warning signals from the chimp system do the best.
Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this clip, then click here for the full unedited episode. And if you like that, then do please consider subscribing to the channel. It means a lot. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.